Want to do an Ironman but worried you don't have enough time to train for it? Well, what if it doesn't actually require as much time as you previously believed? Now, I know some things cannot be rushed, but you can certainly be more economic with the time that you do have available. And we're going to be explaining the training that you absolutely must do in order to complete an Ironman, and then you have the option of adding on any extra. Disclaimer, this is not the recommended amount of training for an Ironman, and it's very much to complete, not compete. Scrimping on training is realistically just going to make your race day experience that much harder. But all of that said, we're here to support you and help you make the most of these few hours of training that you do have available. But before we crack on and break it down, if you want to support the channel, we would love it if you subscribed and if you gave this video a like as well. A while ago, we actually made a video on how to train for an Ironman in just 10 hours. And I want to know if we can beat that. But first, let's take a look and remind ourselves how that breakdown looks. So it consisted of 2 swims of 45 minutes each, 3 bike rides totaling 6 hours, and then 3 runs, one of which was a brick run, and that was a total of 2.5 hours of running. Now, I would love to know if any of you guys actually followed that or have managed to complete an Ironman with just 10 hours of training. Please do share in the comments section below and let us know. Looking at that, it's hard to imagine what could be cut out, but it can be done. Now, before you start, you want to make sure that you're fit and healthy, and then you need to prioritize your nutrition, not only to enable you to train well, but also to make sure that you can recover effectively. And we haven't actually included any time here for traveling, for changing, or for cleaning your bike. And sadly, these are quite large factors you need to consider, especially when you're training for 3 sports, and one of which does involve you having a good working bike. Onto the swim, and I'm going to keep it brief. There really is no scope for reducing the amount of training. After all, you're still going to have to swim 3.8 kilometers, and I'm guessing that's going to take you anything from 1 to 1.5 hours. And yes, I know that is a small percentage of the overall Ironman, but it's still really important, and it's going to set you up for the rest of the race. So with that in mind, we're going to stick with the 2 sessions of 45 minutes each, one with a focus on endurance and adding in a bit of technique work, and the other looking at race pace with a few efforts just above that. With a 10-minute warm-up and a 5-minute warm-down, that leaves you with 30 minutes of working time. And if used efficiently, this can be a meaty set. You've got a race pace example here of, say, 15 times 100 meters turning around on 2 minutes, or if you're quicker, you could get up to 20 times 100 turning around on 1 minute 30, or basically adapt to fit your pace. And then for the endurance set, you could do something as an example of 2 lots of 15 minutes of pull and paddles with 1 minute rest between. The bike makes up the biggest section of the triathlon and therefore needs to make up the largest percentage of your training. You've got to be ready to cycle 180 kilometers and therefore prepared to be on your bike from 5 hours up to 7 hours or even more on race day. And this could well be more than you're even managing to spend on your bike in a whole training week. That's not actually a minimum amount of training required, but bear in mind that the less amount of time you spend training, the more painful it's probably going to be on race day. However, that's not to say more miles are better. Just be conscious what you do cut out. Let's take the 10-hour week again. That allows for 6 hours of cycling, ideally split into 3 rides. One of those really needs to be a long ride, as this is where you build your endurance, you work on holding your position, hone in your pacing, and practice your nutrition, all rather vital. The split between your 3 rides will not remain the same throughout the whole training block. For example, when you're starting out, your long ride only needs to be 2 hours up to maybe 3, which allows you for 3+ hours to split between those other 2 sessions. However, as the event gets closer, you need to start to nudge the time of that long ride up. So a minimum of 4 hours. Ideally, if you can bump it up to 5 hours a few weeks out, that would be great. So an example week, say 4 weeks away from your competition, could look like a 4.5 hour long ride, and then a 60-minute sweet spot ride, and that leaves you with 30 minutes for an easy recovery leg spin. Now you can mix this around and actually make it into just 2 rides a week, so making your second ride a bit longer, but bear in mind that this would mean up to 4 days of no riding in between your rides. And alternatively, at the beginning when you're starting out, you could even ride 4 times a week and make those rides shorter, but as you get closer, you've really got to prioritize that long ride. onto the run, and in order to not exceed 10 hours a week of training, we're only left with 2.5 hours of change after the bike and the run. Now, if you split that between 3 runs, you still have the potential to get fit and conditioned enough to run a marathon. We're all about time saving, quality over quantity, and training smart. The brick run has to be one of the smartest training sessions for those with limited time. A run straight from the bike is win-win. You'll be getting practice at the transition and the unfamiliar feeling of jelly legs, plus you'll be ultimately saving time. Only one training session per se, you'll only have one set of training clothes and only one warm-up, etc. And you've got a choice of how you do this. You could include it at the end of one of your long rides and a nice steady run. Now this is obviously going to help with the natural transition practice as well as getting in that extra run. And that can be something as short as 20 minutes up to a full hour. Alternatively, you could put it after one of your sweet spot sessions. And yes, that's a shorter session, but the intensity is still going to replicate the same fatigue and you'll still get a really similar training effect when you add the run on after that. And as for the run itself, you've got a choice of what pace you do that. You could simply do it as an easy run, or you could look to include some race pace work. So say running 15 minutes at your Ironman predicted pace, just help you get a bit of an idea of how it's going to feel on race day. And then that will leave us with 2 hours to play with. Now, within that time, some of that needs to be your long run, and you'll have one shorter run remaining, and that could either be a recovery run or a run with some sort of intervals or harder work, depending on what you did for that brick run. Again, like the bike, as you get closer to race day, the longer the long run needs to get. And this is where your time is going to limit you slightly. Ideally, you want to be getting up to 2 to 2.5 hours on that run, which, as you can see, would use up all of your allocated time. In that case, either see if you can squeeze in a little extra time or put your long run straight after the bike so you'll experience the same fatigue without having to run for quite so long. On this note, it's worth mentioning that if you put 2 sessions in one day or even quite close together, then they will actually replicate a larger training load and you can use that to your advantage. So it's not quite a brick session, but you're still benefiting, and you can factor this in when you've only got those 10 valuable hours. So to look at the breakdown of the run, a suggestion could be doing 30 minutes at the end of a bike, so 30-minute brick run, looking at doing some race pace work. Then you've got an hour and a half to do a long run, and that leaves you with 30 minutes to either do something a little bit faster, so a threshold effort or some hill reps, or if you're feeling a bit fatigued, then use it simply as a 30-minute easy jog. Now, I'm actually aware that we've ended up using the full 10 hours here, and I'm reluctant to drop off anymore. When I was doing research for this video, I spoke to a couple of friends who have been mad enough to take on an Ironman with less than 10 hours training. And I went to them for some encouragement, and they just said, don't do it. It's not fun. So you've heard it here first. And if you really don't have even 10 hours of time to train, maybe consider doing a 70.3 instead for now. If, however, you are set on an Ironman and you've got less time available, you're going to have to be clever with your time. So potentially you might need to alternate which discipline is the long ride or run each week. So one week you do your long bike ride, the other week you do your long run, so you're still getting that conditioning and that practice of having one long distance of training. If you're a strong swimmer, then you could look to drop your swim down to just once a week. That would save you some time, but it's really hard to say what you can safely drop out without knowing you guys as an individual athlete. So I would just say really approach it with care. Finally, some quick fire tips if time is not your friend. So quality is going to be key here. You want to make every session count, so go in with clear session objectives. Make sure you're well fueled and as rested as possible for those key sessions. Back-to-back sessions are going to be your friend. Time on feet will also help with conditioning for a marathon. So a weekend away, walking with friends or family will help to your training. Strength and conditioning is another potential demand on your time, but if you know that you've got areas of weaknesses, it could end up saving you time in the long run. Do mental prep in your spare time or when you're commuting. Knowing exactly what you're going to be doing on race day, what kit you're using, and understanding your training will also help. Minimize any travel time. For example, could you even stop and do a training session on your way home from work? Indoor training is great for reducing any time prepping, but also eliminating that dead time spent freewheeling or stopped at traffic lights. I take my hat off to you if you are able to complete an Ironman with 10 hours or even less than that of training, but I must admit, I don't envy you. If this is you or you're planning on doing it, well, please share with us your breakdown of how your actual week looks, because we'd love to know, and I'm sure other people could learn from it too. And most importantly, let us know how your actual race goes. Good luck, guys.